Today has been a sad day, honestly. I really didn't expect this to happen. Not like this, at least. Blue Lock Chapter 298 is now out, and this is honestly one of the best chapters I've seen so far. It really brings us back to ground level Blue Lock, honestly. When it comes to NEL, I felt like there was a bit of comfort, in knowing that the top 23 would make it. However, I never really expected for certain characters to make it. If that makes sense. Like there were some characters who I knew they just got this far because they just got this far and got lucky. We all knew they weren't gonna make it. But someone like Nagi, I really didn't expect. Especially considering that Nagi has his own spin-off novel. I thought he would be able to lit his fire and be able to find the ego that he needs to be able to go ahead and be in the World Cup. But now we've seen the downfall of a genius. And this really brings us back to the reality of Blue Lock. That not everyone's going to be able to make it. We knew coming in that only 23 players would make it. And we all kind of expected the same players to make it. But now we knew that that reality isn't the truth. If you guys haven't seen the leaks yet, as you know, Nagi got eliminated today. And he's 24th. He just barely missed it. However, we need to talk about why maybe Nagi being eliminated was probably the right decision. Now, granted, Nagi's an amazing player. I knew he'd be able to pick it up eventually. I didn't think it'd take this long, but he still wasn't able to get it done. And the main problem, really, I felt like during the NEL as a whole, and Nagi, was his inconsistency, especially after his goal against Asagi. Now, when you're reading the spin-off Nagi manga, you feel this like intense passion and just a deeper level with Nagi that we really didn't see before, as Blue Lock is under the perspective of Asagi. But in the spinoff, we get to see Nagi's perspectives. How he feels, how he worries for things, and also how he takes on the pressure and he lives the fire of actually wanting to be a striker and actually enjoying football as time goes on. Now, I can't wait to see the perspective of him after the goal with Asagi, because honestly, even to this day, I'm still not really sure exactly how that fire that happened and came to be in the second selection ended up vanishing off. Now, granted, you can't say Asagi was a big part of that. He defeated Asagi and his whole goal coming back was towards that, which I get. However, a drop off like this really is kind of insane to see, especially 3 games in a row. I mean, Nagi had so much time to pick it up, and by the time he really did figure out what he wanted to do, it was too late. We see Nagi finally figure out that he can't win with Reo. Honestly, it took a while to figure this out, and Reo tried to save Nagi, he really did. But as we can see, Reo has been on a whole nother level by himself. It's crazy how it is, being switched. Because I feel like back in the second selection, Reo needed Nagi. But then later on now, Nagi needed Reo. So just the switch up now from back then to now is really the biggest difference. But when Nagi figures out that he doesn't need Reo and then he has to go off on his own, it's far too late now. We see Nagi dealing with the fear of being alone. This time he's actually scared and terrified. And this is something we really haven't seen that much before. Back in the second selection, even when he was on his last limbs, about to lose anything, I really didn't see him feel no fear. He always felt good to go. But now recently, in this batch and in this chapter, we see him actually scared and terrified. He's worried about being alone. He knows that Reo going on his own, he was able to save himself, and now Nagi tried to do the same, but he wasn't able to do it. And from there, we see Nagi be scared being alone, and then he passes the ball to Reo. However, though, as he passes the ball to Reo, Bachra ends up stealing the ball. Now, I like this post and panel right here, as Bachra tells Nagi that if he can't die here and go on alone, then he failed as an egoist. And this really reverts back to everything since Nagi's been in Blue. Nagi's really the only character you could say in Blue Lock who really had no clear motive when it came to first coming into the Blue Lock realm. All he really did was follow Reo because Reo took an interest in him, and then he just kind of followed his lead and helped to secure Reo's dream. But throughout it all, we really didn't know what Nagi's true dream was. Obviously, you could say he was taking it over Reo to go ahead and win the World Cup with them, but I feel like that dream isn't really meant for someone like Nagi. Nagi needs something else. I feel like more in this game, we finally got to see a little bit more of Nagi's true ego, and I feel like Nagi's true ego is not wanting to be alone. That's why he went and followed Reo all the way and played soccer, a sport that he never cared about, and also ended up doing all these things and being in Blue Lock because of his fear of being alone. If you know from the Nagi spinoff, we know that Nagi's parents are always gone. They have money and they work a lot, so Nagi really just did things by himself. His goal was to just grow up, make a lot of money real quick, and just retire and play video games all day. But Reo actually ended up giving him a new spice for his life, something different. Now he even says that Reo was the first person that actually took interest in him. And that's why he liked Reo, because he finally felt like someone actually cared for him and actually looked into him. And now he has that fear that he'll be alone forever, because now his time with Reo is over. Rio's going to be focusing now on the World Cup, and now he's going to go back to his life. That's why we see in that chapter when he was talking with Reo, how Reo tells him that he can just make money and just go off and retire again. You can tell that Nagi doesn't really want that anymore. He likes to fire. He knew what it was in Blue Lock, and he wanted to never be alone now. And he wants to follow Reo, but he always knew that his dreams were going to be different from Reo. Reo has goals, and he wanted to make Nagi the best striker in the world. Those aren't Nagi's aspirations. However, if you want to survive in Blue Lock, you have to live like an egoist. You have to do things different and on your own. And that's why I really like this chapter, because it really showcases us back to what Blue Lock is about. And that's for being selfish and being an egoist. Granted, a lot of people have their own roles and positions. It's not just about a striker, but still, everyone needs their own type of ego. And in this, being in top 23, it doesn't matter who you are. You got to go ahead. You see, Nagi wasn't willing to die here and do it on himself. Even though he said he's alone, he still passed the ball to Reo, showcasing the difference between him and Bachira. Someone who wants to be the best striker in the world and someone who doesn't. I really am sad, and it sucks to see Nagi go away. However, I do think it probably was the right decision considering how Nagi's play was this last few games. Honestly, his rate just kept dropping over and over, and he wasn't really doing that well. Now, it does suck because he's right under Nanase. Personally, I don't have him over Nanase, but he lost by 1 million, and Nanase played pretty average in the PhD match. However, Nagi didn't do enough to showcase his value anymore. And Ego even predicted this, stating his downfall and how it can have drastic effects. And we've seen it now. After that Super Goal, Nagi was never the same. Now the question is, will we see Nagi again in the future? Now, Nagi has his own spin-off manga, so it kind of makes you think, will the manga just end right here once he's gone? I'm not really sure, but personally, in the World Cup, I mean, we're not going to see him. He didn't make the list. He was cut off. And it's going to be sad to not see him be there on the field with these guys, because I know when he links up with people like Asagi and Bachira and Rin, he plays really well. However, he wasn't able to do anything on his own. And we've seen a really full passion and the works of the NEL and how it showcased your uniqueness. And Nagi just wasn't able to do that anymore. He only had the goal of beating Asagi, and once he did that, he kind of gave up. And once we finally got to see a little bit more fire of him in this last match, it wasn't enough at the time. And he still wasn't able to fully give in to his own ego, allowing people to beat him. I mean, this was really the battle of the toilet bowl between Barsha and Manshine, and Barsha ended up getting the win, making Manshine the worst team ever. And I wish Nagi would have went off on his own and did a little bit more. However, I do see him wanting to play with Reo and trying, especially when they were trying to defeat Asagi. However, it just wasn't enough. And we also see during the NEL that a lot of players adapted. They changed their play styles. They went with what worked. They tried things that didn't work over and over. Nagi tried with Reo. You know, he tried to listen to them. But really, Nagi needs his own sense of talent and uniqueness. He can't just follow others anymore, because Blue Lock is an adapting situation, and it's like being in the hot fire. You know, we've even seen players like Ness go ahead and regain their ego and get a new fire. Everyone who's able to adapt and update are the best in the NEL, and we've seen that. So Nagi just wasn't able to do that, and it really does suck. But hopefully, you know, we can still see him eventually later on. He still has a $24 million bid, so I'm assuming he'll get picked up somewhere if he decides to do that. And maybe we'll see him in a time skip eventually where he's doing well in training. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think really about Nagi and how things will go on for him in the future. I really am disappointed, but it's to be expected, and Blue Lock is cutthroat like that. So I want to hear your guys' opinions. And I thank you guys for watching this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll be back in the next one. Peace.